They sold savory snacks, coccinhas, empadas, esfias, cheap products made for children, sold at the gates of schools. But something was wrong, very wrong, in that quiet neighborhood where mothers trusted their children to the routine of everyday life. 3 people formed a small sect, a sect that called itself the cartel. And while the neighborhood slept, they cooked. What was inside the coccinhas was not chicken, was not ground meat, was nothing that should ever be consumed by a human being. It was human flesh. The cartel believed that consuming the flesh of their victims purified, elevated, and brought them closer to what they called the demon of flesh, a macabre ritual practiced in the depths of that house. Garanhuns, a city known for its mild climate and rich culture, became the stage for unimaginable horror. What once seemed like a quiet, familiar routine turned into the setting for crimes that would shock all of Brazil. The discovery of the first bodies brought to light a reality no one was prepared to face. The remains revealed signs of meticulous rituals and, above all, a cold and systematic cruelty. Police found evidence pointing to a trio that not only committed murders, but did so according to their own logic, almost ritualistic in nature. The trio was made up of 3 individuals who at first glance seemed ordinary: Jorge, a karate instructor, Isabel, his wife, and Bruna, an adolescent who was seduced and completely submissive. Behind this facade, however, Jorge exercised absolute control, manipulating and shaping the thoughts and actions of everyone around him. The formation of the sect, known as the cartel, emerged from this context of manipulation and obsession. Fascinated by numerology, Jorge created his own system to justify the murders they committed, calling his crimes acts of purification. Each ritual had rules. Each death had a purpose within Jorge's distorted logic. The first documented victim, Jessica, in 2008, was lured by a false job offer. The murder was carried out in a ritualistic manner, following the logic of the elements that Jorge had established. The dismemberment was not merely an act of violence, it was a demonstration of the absolute control over life and death that he wielded. The horror did not end there. After the murder, the trio engaged in cannibalism, including the consumption of the flesh by a child only 2 years old, following the subsequent kidnapping of Jessica's daughter. This act, horrifying to anyone else, was seen by the trio as natural and justified within the sect's logic. Bruna, the adolescent seduced by Jorge, actively participated in these rituals, always under the leader's psychological manipulation. Isabel, in turn, became an accomplice, helping to prepare the food and sell savory snacks, such as coccinhas and empadas, filled with human meat, on the city's streets. The trio sold these products in front of schools and hospitals in an act of extreme and calculated coldness. Every detail of the cartel sect's beginnings revealed the complexity and planning behind the crimes. Jorge's obsession with numerology, the first internal ceremonies, and the meticulous preparation of the victims all pointed to a mind that saw evil not as a mistake or impulse, but as a philosophy of life. This is the starting point for understanding how ordinary people can become agents of horror, guided by manipulation, obsession, and a distorted logic of power and control. Each ritual, each choice, and each victim was connected to an internal narrative that the trio believed to be superior to society's moral code. The horror committed by the trio of the cartel sect was not limited to murder. Every act was meticulously planned, ritualized, and justified by Jorge through his obsession with numerology and power. Systematic cannibalism was a central part of this distorted logic. The preparation of the meat followed precise steps. Bruna, still an adolescent, actively participated, being instructed and closely monitored by Jorge. Isabel complimented the process, often suggesting, "Why buy meat if we can use what we already have?" This normalization of the act within the group was terrifying. The trio treated as routine what any other person would find utterly repulsive. The use of snacks, such as coccinhas and empadas, filled with human meat, became a cruel trademark. These products were sold in front of schools and hospitals, turning places of innocence into stages of horror. The lingering question remains, how many people consumed these foods without knowing what they were really eating? In addition to Jessica, other victims were chosen according to a specific pattern. Gisele Helena and Alessandra Falcão were murdered in rituals that reflected the group's obsession with the number 6666666. Jorge psychologically and emotionally manipulated his victims, ensuring that his actions appeared inevitable or predestined. Control over Bruna was absolute. Seduced at the age of 16, she became an extension of Jorge's will. Every step, every action, and even her public statements were supervised. He even sent letters from prison instructing her to take responsibility for crimes she did not commit, maintaining dominance even when physically absent. Isabel's relationship with Jorge was complex, marked by complicity, fear, and dependency. She helped sustain the cartel structure, participating in the logistics of the murders and in the consumption of foods prepared with human meat. The trio transformed acts of extreme cruelty into a carefully organized routine, almost trivialized within the group. Each victim and each ritual carried the weight of a distorted philosophy of purification and sacrifice. The trio did not see their actions as crimes. They saw them as the fulfillment of a higher order, established by Jorge through his logic based on numbers, rituals, and psychological manipulation. This is the core of the case, a manipulative triad that turned cruelty into routine, crime into ritual, and horror into something ordinary for themselves. Understanding the method and motivations is essential to grasp the magnitude of the emotional impact caused to the families, the city, and society as a whole. The horror that shook Garanhuns finally reached a conclusion in the courts. The trial of the trio from the cartel cult exposed to society the full extent of the atrocities committed, revealing an evil that hid behind seemingly ordinary people. Jorge attempted to claim insanity, seeking to reduce his responsibility, but the evidence was overwhelming. Bruna, pressured and manipulated for years, claimed coercion, detailing how every act was controlled and directed by the group's leader. Isabel, silent and strategic, maintained her reserved behavior throughout the entire process, reflecting the dynamics of power and manipulation that existed within the cartel. The final sentences were severe, yet the trauma left behind is irreparable. The victims' families live with constant and permanent pain. Alessandra's father declared, "Nothing will bring my daughter back. The suffering is eternal." The surviving child, who witnessed and involuntarily participated in the acts, carries deep scars for the rest of their life. The case raises disturbing questions. How do ordinary people become monsters? How can routine, manipulation, and obsession transform individuals into faceless agents of evil? The cartel showed that horror is often closer than we imagine, hidden beneath the normality of everyday life. As we reflect on these events, we realize that evil can disguise itself, becoming almost imperceptible until it is too late. Studying these crimes is not only about the acts themselves, but about understanding the psychological dynamics that allow such atrocities to occur, impacting generations and leaving painful lessons about vigilance, protection, and empathy. This is the closing of a story that blends cruelty, manipulation, and ritualism, but also an opportunity for reflection on the value of life, on the dangers of seduction by power, and on how small decisions can unleash unimaginable horrors. The narrative comes to an end, but the impact remains. And you, the viewer, upon learning this story, must ask yourself, how many horrors go unnoticed around us, while normality hides monsters walking among us?